I believe the biggest problem in the world is that people don't understand themselves enough. This show is designed to help you understand your INFJ personality, heal from your past, and create a life that you love. I'm Sarah Kuhn, and this is the Quiet Ones podcast. Hi there. I am back this week with some more of your questions. We had tons and tons of questions last week, and I didn't have time to answer all of them. I think the episode was over 2 hours already. So if you didn't listen to last week's episode, make sure that you go back and listen to it. This week, we are diving into what it means to be an INFJ. Some things that come up for our personality. We're going to talk a lot about relationships, and then also about your life's work, your career, and your purpose in life. So let's go ahead and dive in. The first question says, how do you not absorb other people's emotions and energy? This can be really difficult because it is very easy and very natural for INFJs to absorb other people's energy. I didn't really realize what I was doing until I started learning about being an INFJ. But because we are such deep empaths, because we have such a strong intuition, and we have a function that's called extroverted feelings, we notice how other people feel a lot more than we notice how we feel. And it's easy for us to absorb their feelings because we understand their feelings very quickly. We know how they're feeling, we see it, we feel it along with them, even if it's not something that we personally have gone through. And so it's easy for us to take that on and make it feel like it belongs to us. And we do this unintentionally, unconsciously most of the time. And then we feel like it's our job to solve their problems, right? So if they're unhappy, we want to figure out how to make them happy. If they're depressed, we want to figure out how to make them feel better. If they're angry, we feel like it's our fault, and we want to figure out how to make them happy again. So what we end up doing is taking on those feelings ourselves and then feeling responsibility for it and then trying to fix the problem. The first thing that you can do to not absorb other people's feelings is to notice that you're actually doing it. And it takes a little bit of work to understand that you're doing it, but then also to notice in the moment when it's happening. For me, I notice a lot more when I'm around people that I don't know. One of the examples that I use it's big for me because this is one of the first places that I noticed it was when I go to the grocery store, and maybe there's somebody in front of me who's angry, or, since I live in Boston, there's always people in the grocery store, like tons of people, no matter what time of day or what day that you go. And so people get irritated that, you're standing in the way of what they want, or there's too many people in the aisle and they can't go down the aisle. And I noticed that I pick up on that irritation, and it makes me feel irritated, and it makes me feel responsible for that irritation, even though I don't even know the person. Maybe it's somebody that I've never seen before, probably never going to see them again, but for some reason I can sense that they're irritated, and now I feel irritated, and I feel responsible for their feelings. I notice it a lot when people are angry. It's usually the negative emotions that affect me the most. So when people are angry, when they're irritated, when they're frustrated, when they're really sad, or very unhappy about something, then I tend to absorb that a lot. If people are happy and joyful and having fun, I tend to absorb that less. And I don't know why that is. I think maybe I've just experienced so much anger and irritation, and I have depression. So those emotions feel comfortable for me because that's what I'm used to. But then when somebody is happy and upbeat, then that feels uncomfortable. And so I tend to stay more away from those people. That feels irritating for me. I'm not suggesting that. Obviously, it's better if there are people who are happy that you're around, and then you can soak up those emotions, and that would be way better. But in my experience, we tend to soak up people's negative emotions more. So noticing it is the first thing that you can do, noticing when it's happening, and then figure out a strategy that works for you to combat you soaking up their feelings and feeling responsible for it, right? So for me, when it's strangers, I try my best to distance myself from them as much as possible. So if there's somebody who's angry in the grocery store, then maybe I'll start at the other side of the grocery store, or because I like to like move through the grocery store, so I only have to go through once, and it never works, but that's always my strategy, right? So if I encounter somebody who's in that situation, then I'm like, okay, I'm going to go all the way to the other side of the grocery store and hope that I won't, meet up with them again. If we're standing in line, then I try my best to focus on something else. I try to notice what's happening and why I'm starting to feel icky, and remind myself that I'm not responsible for their feelings, and that, we're only going to be standing here for a few minutes and then I can move on to something else. Another thing that you can do is try to not put yourself in those types of situations. So maybe instead of going to the grocery store at a time where there's a lot of people, maybe you can try and find a time where there are fewer people. Obviously, it's going to be a better experience all the way around. Maybe you order your groceries online, maybe you just avoid that experience altogether. Now, it's a little bit different when it's people that right? Maybe it's people that you work with. Maybe it's your family. That happens a lot. When I was living at home, when I was in high school and in college, I started noticing that all of the people that I lived with, because at one point there was like 10 people who lived in our house because I had so many siblings and then other people there. And I noticed that when I distanced myself from those people, that I felt different, that I was taking on all of their problems, all of their drama, all of their emotions, and I felt responsible to fix all of those things. And so it took me moving out of the house to be able to fix that problem. I didn't have a strategy at that point in my life to be able to distance myself from their emotions without distancing myself from them physically. Now, there are people who will tell you that that is a quote unquote immature approach and that that's not the right way to go. I don't believe that, though. I believe that you have to do the best thing that you can possibly do. Are there better ways to deal with people who are negative towards you, with soaking up people's emotions? There are probably other ways to deal with it, yes. But if you need a right now strategy and it's possible for you to spend time away from them, then I would encourage you to do that. You might find, like I did, that you are a totally different person when you're not around people that you're soaking up their emotions like that. Maybe it's just that the people that you grew up with have very intense emotions that they're outwardly showing. Maybe they're loud and angry. Maybe they cry a lot. Maybe they just are very expressive in their emotions. My older sister was somebody who, if she was angry, everybody knew. If she was happy, everybody knew. That was just how she was. And she also has this anger that would burn like very hot and very quickly, right? So she would get really mad, like super fast, and she would throw these massive fits, and then it would be gone just as fast. And then she would be ready to just be like normal and happy again. And for me, it was like this shocking experience that was like being on a roller coaster. And I am not okay with that. I don't get super mad super quick and then get unmad that quick. If I get mad, it takes me a while to get there, and then it's going to take me several days to not be mad again. And that may be the case for you too, especially if it's one of your parents or somebody who's very influential in your life who has those types of emotions that happen very quickly and very strong, and it's difficult for you to process that. It's a lot easier when there's a lot of distance between you. Then you're giving yourself space to learn about your own emotions because you may not even know about them. If you've spent most of your life dealing with other people's emotions, you may not even know how you feel about things and how you want to react to things. So distance helps a lot. Okay, next question. Why is it so hard for us to let our most loved ones go? I'm not really sure why you're letting your most loved ones go, unless it's like you're in a relationship and you've broken up with them, or maybe it's like your kids leaving the house. I'm sure it's really difficult, because we're so emotionally attached to them, because we as INFJs feel things very, very deeply. And we're not always great at expressing how we feel about other people.
I know for me, I've had a couple of breakups that were really, really difficult. One of them was in 2015, which I honestly can't believe that it's been like 10 years since that breakup. Almost. I guess it's been about 8 years. But it was one of those things that I didn't think that I would ever get through. I thought that nothing was ever going to be the same again, that I wasn't even going to be able to keep breathing. I felt so bad about it. And I told myself that I just had to stop thinking about this person, that, my counselor told me that too. She said that's the only way that you're going to recover, is that you just absolutely have to let this person go. At the time, that felt like her asking me to do something that was completely impossible. And I remember leaving her office thinking, this is not okay. Like, nothing is ever going to be okay again. I had to actively put in the work to stop thinking about that person. I had to, and it was difficult because it was like every single day, constantly, all throughout the day. It was somebody that I thought about, all the time. And there were all of these little reminders during the day. And so I had to actively force myself to stop thinking about that person. And it was really, really difficult in the beginning. It felt like it was impossible and it was never going to work. But then what I noticed is that the more that I put in the work, that it happened little by little at first and then all at once. And then, one day I noticed I hadn't thought about him all day long. And I was like, that's weird, because I thought that there was no way that I would ever be able to stop thinking about him. And I hadn't thought about him. And then before too long, it was a week that went by where I'm like, I haven't thought about him. And then it was several months. And then he really wasn't even a part of my life anymore. And now anytime that I randomly think about him for some reason, it still feels a little bit weird. I won't say that it hurts like it used to, because when I was reminded in the past, it would hurt. Like emotional pain that was so bad that it caused me physical pain. That was something that I had never experienced until that point. I'd heard people talk about it, but I thought maybe they were just being a little bit dramatic or just being, a little bit too extra. But then once I experienced it for myself, then I realized that it's definitely a real thing. And it's horrifying, because there's nothing that you can do to fix it in the moment. It's something that you have to resolve over time. But like I said, it did get better. And now there isn't a lot of pain when I think about this guy. It doesn't control my life. And even though I thought it was impossible at one time, now, 8 years later, I'm honestly shocked at how easy it was. It didn't feel easy in that moment, like I said, but it happened, little by little and then all at once. And so I think about things now that are like, this feels like it's impossible, and that kind of gives me the courage to say, wait a minute, maybe it'll feel impossible in the beginning, and then as I put in the work and start going, then it'll happen the same way, just a little bit and a little bit, and then it's it's really easy. All right, next question. Who is theoretically based on MBTI and Enneagram only the perfect match for the INFJ-T 5W4? So I don't really know that much about Enneagram. I know that Enneagram is a totally different personality typing theory than Myers-Briggs. And so I don't feel like you can combine those two types and come up with some sort of perfect type match. I know that not all INFJs have the same Enneagram type, and I know that that's important. And like I said, I really don't know that much about Enneagrams. So what I do know is that there are certain types that match better. There are certain Myers-Briggs types that match better with INFJs than with other types. I wrote a blog post about it actually that you can find on my blog, and I will post the link in the show notes. It's called The Ideal Partner Type for an INFJ, and you can find it on my blog, which is infjwoman.com. There are several different theories. A lot of people say opposites attract. So, the exact opposite of an INFJ would be an ESTP. I don't really agree with that theory because I think that there's too much of a difference between certain personality types. So I wouldn't personally go looking for a certain personality type, especially like an ESTP, because they're going to be the opposite of you in every single thing. They're going to want to go out when you want to stay in because they're extroverted and you're introverted. They make decisions based on rational thinking, based on facts and logic, rather than based on how you feel. We make decisions based on how we feel, and that's a big thing because if you're thinking about, quitting your job and moving across the country, you're going to be like, it feels like the right thing to do. And they're going to be like, that is a ridiculous idea because the facts and logic don't match up with doing that. Another thing is as INFJs, we have very powerful intuition, right? But ESTPs, they still have intuition, but it's one of their lesser used things. And so when we're talking about knowing something about somebody or feeling like something is going to happen, they're going to look at you like, what are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense. Explain to me what you're feeling based on evidence. I want solid proof that you took in through your eyes or your ears or that you touched or felt. And, you're just going to be sitting there like, I don't have solid proof. I could just tell you that, like, I felt this way. This is what my intuition is telling me. And they're like, that's ridiculous. The last thing is, we as INFJs, we're very organized. We like things to be planned and specific. Somebody who has a perceiving personality type is a lot less organized. They want to keep their options open. They don't want things narrowed down to one particular thing. So for me, the idea of spending the rest of my life with somebody who is so different than me in every single aspect of our personality, that feels a bit like torture. Now, maybe that might be something that's fun for you. Maybe you like the challenge, but I would really, really caution you to spend a lot of time with them before you decide you want to do that for the rest of your life. People say that ENFJs are a good type for INFJs or ENTPs because they're different, but not like totally different. And it's just kind of based on really what you want. Some people say INFJs are the best type for INFJs because they're going to understand you and you're going to understand them the best, which is true. But you also have to consider that if you're dating somebody who has the same personality type as you, you're going to have the same weaknesses. You're going to have very similar faults. For me, that's like, I don't like making phone calls, right? So if we pick a restaurant to go out to and maybe we're just going to get takeout and bring it home, if I have to call them, I'm not going to the restaurant. If they have a website that I can order from, or if they have an app that I can order from, that's totally fine. We can go there. If I have to call them, it's probably not going to happen. So, if my partner feels the same way, then we may never go to a restaurant that requires a phone call again, ever. And, that's a little thing probably in the scope of a relationship, but that applies to a lot of different things too. Like when you have to make a doctor's appointment, or you need to go to the dentist. Maybe you need to, my niece is moving here, so this has been something that's on my mind. She's moving from Las Vegas to Boston, and we were trying to figure out how to get her car here. And so we had talked about me flying out to Las Vegas and then driving with her, which would have been a 4-day drive in the car, which was a lot. And so we were talking about it with my parents, and my dad was like, well, I think I know somebody who does like car transport. So they put your car on like this big truck and drive it across the country. And I was like, cool, can you call them? Because like I would call them, I'm adult enough to be like, okay, I need to call them. But it wasn't like I want to call them. And my dad was like, oh yeah, it's like a guy that I work with, so of course I'll call them. It's, and I'll work out all the details. So we had a couple of minor hiccups along the way. And instead of me having to call some, business person that I didn't know, I could just call my dad or text my dad and say, hey, there was an issue with this. Like, can you fix it? And he would be like, sure. So my dad was more comfortable calling them than I was calling them. So that's one of the things that you have to consider when you're dating somebody that's the same personality type as you. It's a little things, but there are a lot of little things that build up to being big things. Another thing is, let's say that your intuition, your feeling is telling you that you need to go one direction, and your partner is having a feeling that is like, no, we need to go this other direction. Which one of you is going to cave? And maybe you're both stubborn like I am, and you both come to different conclusions. Then what happens? Are you adult enough to say, okay, we're going to work this out and come to a conclusion? Or is that going to be the end of everything and you both are going to go separate ways? It sounds a little bit dramatic, but sometimes when you feel very, very passionate about something, especially like for me, there have been several times when I felt very passionate about moving halfway across the country. And I knew it was something that I needed to do and I wanted to do. But part of it for me was that I had the opportunity to do it. There was nobody who was close to me. I didn't have a boyfriend or a husband who was telling me, we can't do that. We're stuck here. So that's one of the things too that, you have to consider is what's going to happen when your intuitions are telling you different things. There's another theory which I described in the blog post that I told you about, that is called, I don't know if it has a name, but basically what it says is this theory that your best match is only one off of your personality type based on this chart that they have. So for INFJs, it's basically one letter of differentiation. So, well, actually some of them are two. So I take that back. Some of them are 2 letters, but it's the type that's closest to you, right? So for INFJs, that would be an INFP, an INTP, and ENFJ. Those are the ones that are closest. I like the idea that you share a lot of your personality with your partner, and then there are a few things that are different. For me, that means that they're mostly going to understand you, and there are only going to be a couple of things that are a little bit different and you have to work out. So it provides enough of the same that you feel understood, but also enough differences where there are some challenges, which I feel like are good things to work through. And you have somebody who's going to see things from different perspectives as you, which is also good. At the end of the day, I really feel like any personality type works well with INFJs. It really just depends on how much work you're willing to put into the relationship, because that's really what it comes down to. Obviously, like what I said in the beginning, if you have somebody who is different in every single letter than you are, it's going to be a lot more challenging, and you're going to have to put in a lot more work than if you had somebody who was closer to your personality type. But it really just depends on what you want. It depends on what you need from a relationship. Some people, some INFJs like to have an extrovert with them because they want somebody to push them to do more extroverted things. They want somebody to push them to leave the house and, to go hang out with friends and to go out to dinner and out to clubs or bars or, social events, any type of social events. I don't want that because I'm very introverted. I want somebody who's okay being alone together with. I'm totally fine going out to dinner or, to an event once or twice a month. But I want somebody to understand that the majority of my time, I want to be at home. I don't want somebody who's constantly bringing people over to our house or needing to be around other people all the time. That would drive me insane. So it's important to me to find somebody to be alone together with who likes to do the same type of things that I do, but maybe who can challenge me in other ways. My own personal theory is that I would really like to have somebody who's an INFP. One of my friends is married to an INFP, and I had this dream that having an INFP as a partner would just be fantastic because they're so much like you that they would understand a lot about you, but then there's just a little bit that's different. There's also, if you look at the functional stack, they have opposite functions of what we do. I wrote about it in my book, which is called The INFJ User Guide. And of course, I don't have a copy of it right in front of me, but you can get it on my website, and you can also get it on Amazon. And my website is infjwoman.com. But I talked a little bit about cognitive functions. I think there's a whole chapter on it. But for INFJs and INFPs, we have similar functions, but they're just flipped around. So INFJs, our dominant function is introverted intuition, but in INFPs, theirs is introverted feeling. And then our auxiliary function, which is the next one that's the most prominent, we have extroverted feeling. So INFPs had introverted feeling as their dominant, and we have extroverted feeling. So then they, as their auxiliary, they have extroverted intuition, where we have introverted intuition. And then the last two, we have introverted thinking, and as our third one, and their fourth one is extroverted thinking. Their third one is introverted sensing, and then our last one is extroverted sensing. So we're very similar to each other. We just use those functions differently. So just as a quick example, our extroverted feeling that we have, that means that we understand other people's feelings a lot better than our own. And so we work out our feelings through how other people feel. We're more focused on how other people feel than how we're feeling. So we think about how other people feel first, and then we think about how we feel. INFPs are the exact opposite. They think about how they feel themselves. They work out their own feelings and how they feel about situations and things that come out in their lives. And then they relate to people based on their own experience. And it's not, that kind of sounds, when you say they think about how they feel first, it's not that they're selfish or self-centered or narcissistic. It isn't like that at all. It's just that that's where they start with their feeling. They start with saying, this is how I feel. If I were in this situation, this is what I would do. If I were experiencing these things, this is how I would react. And they know themselves very well. They know their own feelings very well. And that's how they relate to other people. And it's different for us. We're kind of flipped around. We know other people really well. We understand their feelings really well. And sometimes we use that to understand our own feelings. So that was something that's, really interesting to me about INFPs. And so then when I met one of my best friends, and her husband is an INFP, and she basically validated every single thing that I thought that a relationship would be like with an INFP. And so that's kind of like something that I'm trying to manifest. I'm just putting it out there in the universe, saying that maybe this is like the thing that could happen for me. But I'm also realistic enough to know that I'm not going to say no to people who aren't that specific personality type. I'm not going to limit myself to one of the rarest personality types in the world. So anyway, I encourage you to go check out my blog because there's a lot more information on there than what I was able to go over here. And again, the blog post is called The Ideal Partner Type for an INFJ, and I'll post a link for it in the show notes too. All right, so the next question says, is it normal to want big love, a deep, soulful connection? Is it an INFJ thing? I feel like it is an INFJ thing. It's always something that I've wanted. I think that part of it is because we feel like we're not really understood a lot. And so we really long to have at least one person in our life that we feel like can understand us. And I think that that's also how INFJs feel loved. We don't necessarily feel loved. I mean, some of us, obviously, we have different love languages, right? But one of the best things that you can do to help us feel like you really care about us is to listen to what we say and to try to understand who we are as people. It's important to us because so many people don't do that. So many people live on the surface and they're just fine not really knowing who their friends are. As long as you're okay with talking about the things that they want to talk about and validating them the way that they want to be validated, they don't really care about you, unfortunately. I mean, I've had a lot of friends who I would call and talk to them, or I would text them and see how they were, and they're more than happy to talk about their problems or the things that are going on in their life, but they would never ask me about my problems. My older sister was like that. And she would constantly, she would buy me dinner a lot. So we would go out to dinner when we were in high school and then a little bit after high school. Since she was a couple of years older than me, she had a car before I did and she had a job before I did. And so she liked to eat at these nicer restaurants than what we typically ate at. And so she would always try to entice me to spend time with her by buying me a nice dinner. But then she would sit there through the whole 2 hours that we were in the restaurant and talk about her problems and what she was interested in and what she was doing. And she would ask me for advice, but then she never wanted to hear about my problems. And if I started talking about something that was going on in my life, she would switch the subject back to her. So I grew up feeling like that was normal. So I have to preface that. It was very strange for me when I met a friend who didn't do that. When we would go to lunch, this friend would say, "How are you? What's going on in your life?" And I was like, I don't really want to talk about me. I'm not used to talking about me. Years later, I met another friend who I'm still really good friends with, and we met through Instagram. And so she asked me, and we both live around Boston, or we did both live around Boston. And she asked me to go out to coffee with her so that we could meet in person. And so we agreed to go to coffee in Cambridge, which is north of Boston. And I live south of Boston. So it was probably over an hour drive for me to go up there. But I agreed because, going out of my way for my friends is a normal thing for me. So I went to coffee and we sat there and talked for, 3 or 4 hours because we're both INFJs and we get along really, really well. But as we were leaving, we planned on meeting up again. And she asked me where I would like to go. And I said, well, I don't really know any other places around Cambridge. I don't spend time in Cambridge because I live south of Boston. And she's like, well, is there a place south of Boston that you would like to go to? She said, you drove all the way up here to meet me. So I think next time, I should come to see you. And so, we can pick a place that's closer to where you live. And for me, that was seriously? You're going to drive an hour south of Boston to come to coffee with me? And she was like, well, yeah, you did that for me. So of course I'm going to do that for you. That's a normal give and take in relationships. And I was like, wow, I've never experienced that before. Like every friend that I've ever had has insisted that I come to them. You know, that's what my sister did when I was growing up, and that's just what I'm used to. And I've been friends with a lot of people who were insisting and demanding and not very accommodating. And, you know, obviously they weren't really interested in a two-way friendship where both people give and take. So, I mean, having experienced a lot of that, and I know that that's not the experience for every INFJ, but I know that a lot of us have that experience because a lot of us end up being people pleasers. It's a natural thing for us because we feel how other people feel and we want to make them happy. And a lot of times we sacrifice our own needs and wants and desires for the people around us. So for us, you know, when somebody meets us even halfway, it feels like a big thing. And as far as wanting big love, I mean, wanting this really deep connection with somebody, I've always wanted that. I've always wanted somebody just to go, you know, just to meet me halfway, because I feel like that would be a massive thing. But if they would understand me on a deeper level and be interested in even a few of the things that I'm interested in, you know, if they would want to sit and have deep conversations about meaningful things, I mean, I would do that all day long. I feel like I wouldn't need very many more friends if I had just like this one person who was like the person, but then they would probably get tired of me after a while. So yeah, I think it's definitely an INFJ thing to want a really big love. Somebody who's really important to us. I think another aspect of it too is that we have a very active imagination and we're really good at noticing things about other people. So for me, I've talked about this a little bit, but it's almost like I have this movie that's playing in my head that is like I've imagined this great relationship with somebody and all of the things that would make it super special. And I think that imagining or thinking that somebody in person is going to match what, like, the idea that I have in my head, I think that's kind of on the same level as expecting somebody from TV or movies to be like a real person, because that's not always how it is. But I also think that it's important to know what you want and to know what's acceptable for you and to not settle for somebody who is not acceptable. If you want a really deep and soulful connection and the person that you're with or the person that you start dating doesn't have that, then I don't think that you should settle for them. Even at the place that I am in life, I'm 36, gonna be 37 this year. I'm not interested in settling. You know, a lot of people who get to my age are like, I just want to have a kid, and so it doesn't matter like who it is, I'll be with whoever will be with me so that we can have a baby. And there's part of me that sort of understands that, but at the same time, I'm not willing to sacrifice the rest of my life being unhappy just so that I can have a baby. And I also, like, I'm not interested in getting a divorce or, you know, having a baby without being married. But that's my own personal belief. I don't, you know, project that onto other people. But I'm just not interested in settling. I think that's part of it. I don't want to be married just to be married. I don't want in a relationship just to be in a relationship. I want to wait for this special person, for somebody who is that deep, soulful connection, because I believe that it exists. And I think that all we have to do is find it, is figure out how to get to it, and that's it. All right, next question. It says, are INFJs compatible with ISFPs? Sure, I think they can be compatible. I spoke about this a little bit earlier when we were talking about the ideal partner type for an INFJ. I think they certainly can be compatible, especially if you're willing to put in work. Any relationship is going to require work. You just have to decide what you want. So with an ISFP, there's going to be a lot of things that are different from being an INFJ. So as long as you're aware of those things, and I like to study different personality types, especially when it's somebody that's close to me, so that I know when a conflict comes up, when they're reacting differently or reacting in a way that I don't understand, then I can go back to their personality type and say, okay, this is why we have a problem. You know, I've told the story about my niece. My niece is an INTP, but she has a problem making decisions. And it's something that we talk about a lot, because not only is she 19 now, but she has a perceiving personality type, and she doesn't like to narrow things down to just one option. But when it comes to a point where she has to pick something, it's extremely difficult, and it can be like pulling teeth. And for other people that are around us, like my parents have a very close relationship with her, and they just get really frustrated with her because, you know, there can be very long conversations with her trying to make a decision. and I understand it, because I understand her personality. And so I am able to show her a lot of patience and try to help her come up with a strategy where she feels comfortable making a decision. And then try to remind her that, you know, you don't have to stick with this decision for the rest of your life, right? You know, if we're in a restaurant picking something to eat, you don't have to eat this one thing for the rest of your life. You know, if you don't like it, you can order something else. If it's not the best thing, then, you know, we can pick something up on the way home. Like, it's not that big of a deal. It doesn't need to feel like an existential crisis just to pick one thing. But then when it comes to bigger decisions, like she was trying to decide when she was in high school if she wanted to play volleyball, I think it was. And she didn't really want to play volleyball, but all of her friends were playing volleyball, and so she wanted to be with her friends. And so there was a process there of saying, you know, are your friends more important than you? Can you hang out with your friends at other times? But it was like an hours long conversation where for her, it felt like the end of the world. And in those situations, if you don't understand her personality type, you can be very frustrated very quickly. And even me, I get frustrated with her sometimes too. I'm not by any means saying that I'm perfect or that I know how to get everything done, you know, correctly, and that I always say the right thing, because I don't. But it makes those conversations in those situations more manageable. It makes them a little bit easier when you know that that's part of her personality type, and that there are different strategies that you can use to help her make a decision. Recently, you know, she decided to move to Boston, and I was kind of surprised. That was a pretty relative easy decision, but I think it's because it's been something that she's been thinking about for years. And so it was just kind of something that she had already decided and was planning on. And we just had to work out like the logistics, which worked out pretty well. But as far as having a relationship with an ISFP, I mean, the decision-making thing is one thing. There's also an organization thing in there too. INFJs tend to be very organized and planned. We want to know what's coming. People who have a perceiving personality type tend to be more spontaneous. They want to see what happens. I like the restaurant example and the food example because I think it shows a little piece of what your life might be like that can be frustrating. So for INFPs, they don't like to narrow things down to one decision, right? It's difficult for them to do that. They want to stay open to new ideas and new concepts, and they don't want to feel like they're trapped in one decision. So what that looks like on a day-to-day basis, you know, if you're going out to dinner, you might be like, I really want to eat at the Cheesecake Factory. Like, I've been thinking about this one particular dish. I really want some Godiva cheesecake, you know, after dinner. I've really been thinking about this. This is what I want. And they're like, okay, you know, the Cheesecake Factory sounds good, but you know what? There's this new restaurant that we haven't tried that has Italian food, and maybe you would like their Italian food. Or there's this like really great Chinese restaurant that we haven't been to in a while. Chinese might be really good too. Or, oh, you know, one of my friends was telling me about this other restaurant that's really not that far from here that they said was really good. And in that situation, it's like, hold please. I told you exactly what I wanted. And you're making all of these other suggestions. So if you don't understand their personality type, you might be very frustrated with them and want to start like yelling at them and be like, what in the world? I told you what I wanted. Why are you giving me all these other options? That doesn't make any sense. But when you understand that they like options, then it makes more sense. That's like, they're trying to be helpful. They think that it's helpful by giving you a bunch of options because they like to have a bunch of options. You don't like to have a bunch of options, and so you are trying to be helpful by saying, this is exactly what I want. Can we do this? So, I mean, that's just one aspect of your personality, right? And that's just one example. There are going to be a lot of things that you have to deal with that are like that. It helps that they have a feeling aspect to their personality, right? But there is a little bit more logic and ration, I feel like, in sensing than there is in intuition. Because to me, intuition feels like this very magical, mysterious type of thing that's really hard to explain, especially to people who aren't very tuned into their intuition. Somebody who has a sensing preference, it's not that they don't have intuition. They do. Everybody does. They just don't use it very often. They're not very plugged into it. And so there might be times when they feel it, but they really won't understand it as well as we do because they don't use it as much as we do. But at the same time, we're not very plugged into our senses either, you know? And the things that make sense to them, they don't really make sense to us. When we see things or hear things, you know, we're adding meaning to them. We're interpreting what's happening behind the scenes with our intuition. They're taking everything at face value. And those can be difficult conversations because if you meet somebody, maybe it's one of their friends, maybe it's their boss, somebody that's important to them, and you get like that intuitive flash that's like, this is not a good person. And you try to share that with them, they're going to start down the path of like, you're judgmental. I don't know why you're judging these people so quickly. How can you say that? You know, all these types of things, depending on how you approach it, obviously. But still, there's going to be that gap there because they don't really understand how your intuition works. And maybe you're not very good at communicating it, because I'm not always good at communicating it either. It's taken me a long time to understand why people think I'm so judgmental. And a lot of me being offended by feeling like I'm judgmental before I realized that, you know, what exactly was happening. So yes, I think a relationship with an ISFP can work. It really just depends on how much work you put into it. All right, next question. Girls tell me I overlove them and that they are fed up with it. That's just how I am. What do I do? I think that it's important that you be true to who you are, your true, authentic self. Not everybody's gonna like you. Not everyone is gonna like your personality. Not everyone is gonna understand you. And that's okay. They don't have to. But the right person will appreciate who you are. And they will adore your personality rather than tell you that you're annoying. So I think the best thing for you to do is to continue to be who you are. And that if the people around you don't like it, then they're just not the right people. You need to find people who appreciate you for who you are. I've spent a very large part of my life with people telling me that my personality is wrong, that I'm too quiet, that I'm too direct, that I want too much, I I have too high standards, that nobody can live up to my standards. The list just goes on and on, right? When I was in school, I had perfect grades, but there was a note on almost every single one of my report cards that says, Sarah's too quiet, she doesn't speak up enough. She doesn't participate in class. She doesn't have very many friends. And everybody thought that that was a problem. I remember having so many conversations with my mom when I was growing up, with her telling me that I needed to have more friends. I needed to figure out how to make more friends. Now that I'm, 36, I don't have a lot of friends, and that's okay. And it's just recently that I've accepted that for myself, that I don't need tons of friends. I'm okay with having 2 or 3 friends, and I'm okay with them not living in the same place as I do. We can be Facebook friends, we can be Instagram friends, we can talk on video chats, and we can have a great friendship and a great connection. We don't have to live in the same place. So I think it's important that when people tell you those things, that you take it with a grain of salt. They are responding to you based on their level of understanding. And maybe the people who are telling you this believe that to be true, and maybe it is true for them, but that doesn't mean that it's true for you. So when somebody tells you that the way that you express love to them is too much, maybe it just means that it's too much for them. Maybe it's just that they're not that into you. Maybe they're in the relationship or the friendship for different reasons than what you are. Maybe you feel really deeply about them and they're just going out with you because it's convenient, which is a difficult thing to hear, right? Especially if it's somebody that you have your heart set on, that you really adore, and they're just not that into you. I really think that the best thing for you to do is to find somebody who appreciates you the way that you are, because those people are out there. And it may be that it's just going to take you a little bit more looking to find them. But I think it's important that you wait for the right person. I don't believe in changing yourself to meet other people's needs, because what's going to happen is that you're going to feel very inauthentic. You're going to feel trapped, and eventually your true personality is going to come out and they're not going to like you. That's happened to me so many times. I have tried for years and years and years to change myself so that other people will like me. And that's always what happens to me. If I tell people, like, for instance, there was a company that I worked for where the division that I worked for was revolved around NASCAR racing. And that was why I went to work there, because I love that type of racing and I had experience in racing. But the company was right outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. And that year that I went to work there, the football team in Charlotte was doing really well. They typically hadn't done very well, and so nobody really cared about football. But, for some reason the team was doing well this year, and so everybody was talking about football. They were all like bandwagon fans, right? Or what we called fair weather race fans, right? If the team was doing well and it was a nice day outside, then sure, they were going to go watch football. But if the team wasn't doing so well, they really didn't care. So since the team was doing well, everybody was watching football and they were all talking about it at work all the time, constantly. And I didn't like football. I didn't watch football. My dad had watched football while I was growing up and I didn't understand it. And he's not the type of person to explain things. So you don't ask questions, just go away. So I actually started watching football because I literally had nothing to talk about at work. And it was annoying and exhausting and I hated it and I didn't really understand it and I wasn't interested enough in it to actually understand it. And so it was basically just annoying and ridiculous. And then when I went to work and started talking to people, since I didn't really understand it and I wasn't really that into it, there still wasn't a lot that I could add. And when I did say something, I sounded kind of ridiculous. And so it was pretty apparent that I wasn't really into football. And so my desperate attempt to try to make friends at my new job didn't really pan out very well. And because I wasn't really committed to it either, people would later, they would still ask me about football and I wouldn't know anything because I had quit watching it. So it's kind of like, do you want to spend the rest of your life pretending to like something? Or do you want to spend the rest of your life pretending to like, going out, hanging out with friends, and do that 5 or 6 days a week just because the person that you want to hang out with does that? It really depends on what you want. If you want to do that, I would encourage you to try it. Like, I'm not going to say don't do it. I would encourage you to try it because I feel like a lot of people have to make their own mistakes before they learn lessons. I know that I do. I used to think that I wanted people just to tell me everything so that I wouldn't have to make my own mistakes. But then I wouldn't believe what people said because what they said didn't match up with what I thought. And so then I would want to make my own mistakes. And it's a difficult way to learn, but I think it's also important because that way you understand from firsthand experience. And it's also a difficult lesson because we typically don't put in that type of work as INFJs. We won't go to those types of lengths for somebody unless we really, really care about them. So you're talking about somebody that you really care about and you're willing to change a lot of things about yourself. But I mean, like I said, in my experience, you end up being miserable. And maybe you will get that person to like you, but you yourself will be miserable, and then you'll decide you don't like that person and you have to start all over again. All right, next question. Why do I burn out so easily? It's affecting my studies. It is very easy for INFJs to burn out, especially if you're at college or if you're in high school. Part of it is because when you're in school, you're surrounded by lots of other people, right? And there's all this social pressure to fit in. Plus you have a lot of stuff to do because, especially if you're in college, you have multiple classes, tons of homework. So you have to spend a lot of time in focused energy, learning new things and memorizing things. And you have a deadline to do it. It's not like you can just decide that, hey, I don't feel like doing homework today. If you have something that's due tomorrow, it has to be done today, right? It can also be difficult if you have a job too, because you're exposed to people all day long at school, and then you have to go to work. And it's not always the case, but generally when you're in high school and college, you tend to work in a lot of like customer service related jobs. When I was in high school, I started working at Walmart. I worked at Taco Bell for a short time. I worked at Michael's, which is like an arts and crafts store. I worked at Walmart for about 4 years between high school and college. And then I ended up working in places like Bath and Body Works and White House Black Market, which were all like very heavily customer service jobs. And some of the places like Bath and Body Works, they encouraged their employees to go talk to people. And they had like these zones set up in their store, and they're like, you are in charge of this zone. And every time somebody enters into your zone, you need to go approach them. And I went to work there because I like Bath and Body Works. But one of the things that I don't like about them is that as a customer, when you go into their store, there are like 12 people who are like, hi, can I help you? Let me tell you about all the sales that we have going on. And so then once I started working there and they were telling me about these zones, and I was like, oh, that's why the people who work there are like constantly harassing you, because they're like pressured to do that. And if you don't do that, then they give you more what they call coaching. And I don't know if this is still the case because it's been almost 10 years since I've worked there. So maybe it's different now. Hopefully it's different now. It's really good customer service, I'll tell you that. And if you're extroverted and you like talking to people, then maybe you're going to like having 12 people approach you and help you find something when you go to a store. If you were an introvert, you don't like that. You want to shut those people down as fast as you can and like avoid those people when you're in the store. So when you work there as an introvert, it's really difficult to like, you know, you're spending 4 solid hours, sometimes 8 hours on the weekends, just engaging with these people, and that's challenging to do, right? So if you have a customer service job, it is burning you out very easily because as introverts, we're not really designed for those type of jobs. We don't like those jobs. And your personality, your introvertedness, that means that you lose energy by talking to people, right? So you're losing energy the whole time you're at work. You're losing energy when you're talking to people at school. You know, you're losing energy anytime. When I was in college, I had these like classes that were designed around group projects. And so not only did we have a class where I think we went to class twice a week. And then they would make us schedule like 2 or 3 group meetings per week. So it was like this constant interaction with work and school and group projects. And there were any type of place that I had, you know, that was like provided by the school to study, whether it was the library, there were computer labs. Sometimes there were other labs where we were working on projects. There was people around everywhere, constantly. Also, part of my transportation was there was people around because I had to ride the bus to the other side of campus. So that's all of those things add up to why you're burning out. And then, so that's just like being an introvert, like on a daily basis. All of that is taxing on your energy, right? Another thing that leads to burnout is taking on too much at once. So maybe you don't have the capacity right now to do 15 credit hours at college or 19 credit hours. Even though you need to do that to finish your degree in 4 years, I had a really difficult time handling that much because I was always working as well. And then I had all this other stuff going on too. So maybe you're taking on too much. That will make you burn out very quickly. Maybe you're spending too much time with your friends as well, on top of all of this other stuff. And maybe your friends are the type of people who need you to be around. They need a lot of contact with you. But in that, not only are you losing energy because you lose energy when you're around people, maybe you're also acting as their counselor and you're taking on their problems and trying to help them through everything. That all of that can lead to burnout too. Another thing that you have to think about right now is there are a lot of problems going on in the world, right? We've been through a pandemic that has lingered on for 2 years now, and that's enough to make anybody burn out, even the most stable, emotionally healthy people. There's a lot of what's called pandemic fatigue or COVID fatigue, that it's not only if you actually were sick, but also just dealing with the aftermath of all of it, dealing with the fear and the anxiety, all of the unknowns, you know, dealing with maybe your friends and family have a different opinion about how safe it is to go outside, to go to restaurants, to be at school. All of that, you know, it doesn't matter what your opinion is. If your friends and family have different opinions, you probably feel like you're in the middle of a conflict, even if you can agree to disagree. If you can't agree to disagree, then there's a massive conflict that you're going through. I've dealt with that myself. I have friends who have a wide range of different opinions about how safe things are and, you know, what treatments are effective and all of those things. And none of us are doctors, you know, so it's really just, who do you believe? But all of that conflict, that will wear on you. And it's not like a simple, easy answer. And it's been going on for more than 2 years now. So that has been like grating at everybody for more than 2 years. And then you look at what's going on in the news. in other parts of the world, like what's happening in Ukraine. It's a terrible, horrible, awful thing. And it's even worse because there isn't a whole lot that we can do about it. If you're looking at what's happening, if you're staying up to date on it, that can wear on you a lot. And it will affect you more than what you think that it does. Honestly, it's one of the reasons why I try not to watch the news. I try to stay away from it because I know that a lot of what's on the news, a lot of all of the stories, they're not the facts and logic of what happened. They understand that people stay tuned in when they're afraid, when they're worried, when they're concerned, when it sounds like it's the end of the world. You have to understand that they make money by you watching their television programs, by you clicking on their stories on the internet, because, if they don't have an audience, they don't exist. And they have a lot of people who get paid a lot of money to figure out how to make you keep watching. Stay tuned. Make sure that you watch the news all day long and tune in tomorrow, There's a reason that they make everything sound like it's the end of the world. It keeps people coming back. And it's not necessarily what's actually happening. So it's important for you as an INFJ to understand that and to protect your own mental health, to help lower your anxiety, because the higher that your anxiety is, the more easily you're going to burn out. A lot of INFJs are highly sensitive people. And so what that means is that we're more sensitive to a lot of things than most people are. So we're a lot more sensitive to fear and anxiety. We're a lot more sensitive to people around us having really strong emotional reactions to things. We're more sensitive to even things like flashing lights. So like the lights that come off of your TV, the lights that come off of your phone, your computer, you don't really think about it, because if you're like me, you're looking at your computer all day and then watching your TV for a long period at night and probably spending a lot of time on your phone in the in-between time. And it's such a normal thing that you don't understand that those type of lights are going to have an effect on your brain activity and your emotions. So if you spend time away from those things, if you go outside and, go for a walk, even just a short walk at lunchtime or in between classes or something, it can have a massive effect on you, because there's a big effect of what's called grounding. So if you take your shoes off and you walk in the grass, there's an energy that comes from the earth that will help ground you and help you feel better, help balance the energy that you have going through your body. So it's important when you're burned out, it's really easy to just, feel overwhelmed and not really know what happened or what caused it. But it's important to look at every single thing that's going on. It may not be just one thing. Maybe the thing that you think it is was just the last thing, right? It was the last straw. Maybe you just don't know what happened. It was just a million little things. But a million little things add up to a really big thing, right? And even though, like I said, we're coming out of the pandemic, there's still a lot that has built up over the last couple of years. There's a lot that comes with that. So I just encourage you to be gentle with yourself. I have done a couple of podcast episodes on burnout because it's something that I'm very familiar with. And I've written a couple of blog posts as well that I'm going to link in the show notes so that you'll have those and you'll know exactly what to do to get out of it. Basically, it helps to be aware of what's going on, to give yourself time and be gentle with yourself in the recovery process, because it's another one of those things that for me, it happens little by little at first and then all at once. And sometimes, depending on how bad your burnout is, sometimes it takes me 6 months to recover. I was sick throughout all of 2020. And so not only was it like work stress and pandemic stress, it was like I literally could not breathe. And so there was a lot of health stress that I had, a lot of anxiety about not being able to breathe and not knowing why I couldn't breathe. And so once I was finally able to figure out what it was and get a solution to it, then there was like this period of, I don't want to do anything. I just want to sit on the couch and watch TV. And I felt really guilty about that at first, because I'm not the type of person who is like, you know, lazy, who just doesn't want to do anything. I'm the type of person who has 2 or 3 jobs. Like, I want to have a job and then start my own business, and I have a podcast and a blog, and I want to write a book, and, you know, like, I just have this whole list of things to do. And that's probably part of the reason that I was in burnout, was because, you know, I was just overwhelmed with all the pressure that I put on myself. And then with my health deteriorating, then it was like, okay, you can't do anything else now. So it took me a while of just resting and relaxing and not stressing about what I was doing or what I wasn't doing or what wasn't happening, what wasn't getting done. It took me some time to just rest and to sort everything out in my head without any type of pressure. And then once I felt rested, then I could move on to the next stage of, you know, trying to figure out what is an appropriate amount for me to take on without it being too much. And people ask me too, how long does it take? How long does it take to get out of burnout? How, you know, what's the fastest way to get out of burnout? There are different stages, and I have a free handout too that I'll link in the show notes as well. It takes as long as it takes. And I know that sounds like a really ridiculous answer, because when people tell me that, I get super frustrated. Like, I want to know that I can spend a week in the first stage and a week in the second stage and a week in the third stage, and then I can be done. Or can we narrow that down to like 3 days or maybe even a day? And sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes it's going to take a month, and you know, you can't force your mind to recover quickly. You can't force your body to heal faster than it does. So it takes as long as it takes, and you'll definitely know when it's time to move on to the next stage, for sure. All right. Well, I think I got to everybody's questions. If you made it to the end of this episode, and especially the end of last week's episode 2, thank you so much for listening. I know both of these episodes have been really long, way longer than episodes that I usually do. But I really appreciate you guys asking all these questions. I appreciate you listening, first of all. I appreciate you sending me all these questions and being able to talk about things that are important to you and things that you want to hear about. I think it helps all of us to know that we're all struggling with the same things. We all have the same type of thoughts and feelings, the same worries, the same concerns. And it helps so much to just hear somebody say, I feel the same way. I've done the same thing. I've been there too. So anyway, I'm happy to answer all of your questions. If you have any more questions, or if there was one that I didn't get to, you can always send it to me again. Maybe we'll do some more of these episodes in the future. You can send it to me on Instagram. You can follow me at INFJ Woman. I think you have to follow me in order to comment, and then you can send me a direct message as well. And I read all of my direct messages, so rest assured if you send it to me, I'm definitely going to get it. I may not get to it right away, because sometimes it takes me a couple of days, but I'll get it and I'll respond to it. You can also submit a question on my website, which is thequietonspodcast.com. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there is a contact form. It says, for general inquiries, please get in touch. And you can send me a question there. Yeah, I guess that's what we have for today's episode. Again, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate every single one of you. I hope that I'm able to help. That is definitely what I want. That's why I do what I do, why I write my blog, and why I have this podcast. And I'm so thankful for you listening. And yeah, I hope that I can help. And I will see you again next week.
Hi there! I just wanted to take a minute to say thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it. Please consider subscribing to my channel. I'm working very hard to produce content that will help you, and I really appreciate your support. Also, if you want some more inspiration, check out this video right here.